Today we're going to talk about taking the pictures that we shot the other day with our DIY turntable, and we're going to be kind of processing them and getting them, off of Google Drive into the Lightroom application. And then we're going to be using the Lightroom application and then sending the pictures over into Photoshop, and then inside of Photoshop creating the actual the actual animation part using the timeline feature. So that's kind of the workflow, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through those steps just so that we can kind of create those animated GIFs for us. So let's go ahead and take a look in here. So I opened up Lightroom already, and I want to add my photos to Lightroom. So there's a couple of ways I can do that. You guys should have them inside of Google Drive, so you might want to just download them from Google Drive. If you have your Lightroom set up so that it's still accessing Google Drive, then you can just add them, right? So let me take a quick look here. Mine's set up a little bit different because mine's on, this library isn't on the Google Drive. So I'm just going to go ahead. I have a folder on the desktop, and it's just DIY. So I'm just going to click and drag and drop it here. When I do that, it's going to open up the import window. And so here's all the photos that we shot the other day, or that I shot the other day. And there's our two different objects. And so I've got a couple of options of how I can do this. If you guys are doing them from Google Drive, one of the options is add. Now, as long as if everything's staying on Google Drive, then add is fine, because it's just going to add it to the library. The library will know where they are. It'll know how to find them inside of Google Drive. If I did copy, then what that would do instead is it would make a copy at whatever that destination is. So if I wanted to have a copy on the computer, but I think if you guys do it through Google Drive and just add, that would be the best way. So just be careful with that, though. If you move the files, it's not going to know where they are, but that kind of is always the case. So when I do that, it's just going to keep the file name in the folder where it already is. So then we can just go ahead and say import. So now as it continues its import, there's a couple of things that we can do. So now we've imported our photos, and we're going to do most of the work inside of Photoshop, right? There are things we could do like color adjustments and those sort of things inside of here, but because they're all going to be in one document inside of Photoshop, and it's going to be layers, we can just use one adjustment layer that can adjust the colors and things like that for us inside of Photoshop. So we don't need to necessarily do it inside of Lightroom. If we shot raw, we might want to make some adjustments and things before we send it over here, but it's not, in this case, we locked the exposure, so our exposure isn't going up and down. So they should be all pretty good as far as the exposure goes. And then it's just a matter of little things. What I really am most concerned about is what I'd like to do is go in and quickly kind of, make this all so it's actually white, set a crop for it, and then also maybe eliminate this edge here. And we'll see what that looks like once we get inside there. So I'm going to hit G on the keyboard. That'll bring us back to the grid view. So I'm just going to work on this, the one of the earbuds to start with. And so I'm just going to hold the Shift key and click there, and that then selects all of those photos. Now, we've got a couple of options here. I think the easiest way for us to do this, so let me just lay out the two options first. We could export everything and put it inside of, into a folder and make them smaller. Because the thing's going to be, it's going to get really large when we get them inside of Photoshop, because we've got 35 photos selected. So it's going to create 35 layers of that, and that's going to get pretty large. But stacking them up is going to be difficult if we have them all as loose files. So I think we're going to try it this way, and we'll see how big the files are. I think our computers can handle it. So we've got these 35 selected. What we're going to do is we're going to right click. So I'm doing a 2-finger touch, but you could hold down the control key and click. You could, if you're using the Wacom tablet at school, you could use the little button. However it is that you get to the secondary menus, but I'm just going to do a 2-finger tap. You can do that on the trackpad as well. So one of our options is edit in. So we're going to click here where it says edit in, and then we've got options. Now don't just click this first one, edit in Photoshop. That'll open them up as tabs, and that's going to be a lot of copying and pasting to get them into one document. So we're going to instead choose the bottom one, which says open as layers in Photoshop. So we're going to click there. Now this part may take a little while, so we'll just take a quick cut. So now it moved over inside of Photoshop. It's creating a document. It's going to kind of blink on and off as it loads each of those different each of the different frames. So we'll just zip it up here really quick and fast forward. All right, so now we've loaded up all of our files. And so let's take a quick look. If we look down here at the bottom, our document file size is 2.38 gigabytes right down here. So that's a really big file, right? I mean, it's, our computers have 16 gigs of RAM, so it's not like it's taking up all of the processing power of the computer, but it's quite a bit just for this one little file that we just started. So we're gonna do a couple of things right off the bat to try to get our size down so that it's not quite so unmanageable for the computer, because otherwise it starts going really slow and takes longer to process. So first things first, let's start with a crop, because I don't need this big tall thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and crop the file. And I mean, I could just come straight down into like a little bit of more of like a horizontal variation of it. That probably would work okay. I could even go square. I don't need this extra space over here on the sides probably. Because again, let's say I was getting my end goal, let's say, is to deliver this to the client. They're going to put it on a website, right, as like a product shot. So if they have a white background, then we just need a little bit of space around the edges, and then it bleeds into white anyway. So I think we can get in here quite a bit tighter. So let's go ahead and transform that, and we'll say okay to that. And because this is in one document, when we crop it, it crops all 36 layers, right? Which is great. That's what we want. And I'm just going to scroll through here. It looks like they stay inside of that. Nothing's getting cut off or lost, as it rotates around. So I think we're okay there. Now, just that alone took our file from 2 gigabytes down to a little bit less than a gigabyte. So it's still a it'd be 1024 megabytes would be a gigabyte. So it's pretty close, but it cut it in half basically. So let's check our file size, or like our actual pixel size. So let's go here and go image, and let's go image size. So even with that crop, our height is still 2,173. And so, like if we think of like resolution and things, we probably, on the web, we probably don't need it more than like 1,000 pixels. Even like Instagram is like 1,000 by 1,000 for most of its things that it recommends. So let's just go ahead and make this width 1,000. 1,000, and then we'll say okay. So with that new resizing, our file went down from 1 gigabyte to 249 megabytes. So again, about 1/4 of the size that it was previously, and about 1/8 of the size of what it was originally. So a significantly smaller file, and this will be a lot easier for Photoshop to go ahead and deal with, but also it's really the size that should be right for the web anyway, because we don't need these huge files that are bigger than what it can really display on the screen, and then also that are going to make things go slower, because internet, we want things to work fast, right? We want them to load and things. So I'm going to get out of the crop tool and just move to my move tool, and I'm going to hit Command 0. That just gives me full size, and we can see, like, even here, it's now displaying it at 200 pixels. But if I wanted to see it at 100 pixels, that's the size that it actually be. And on a website, that'd be fine, because we're gonna have other stuff around it, right? So now we've got it down to a manageable size. So then the first thing I'm gonna do is so I'm on the very top layer. I'm gonna go ahead and add an adjustment layer, and I wanna start to just play with the contrast a little bit. So like we talked about before, because the first thing I want to usually set is levels, because levels I can kind of quickly control like where my white point and my black point is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And with this levels adjustment, then I'm just going to go ahead and, let me drag this down just a little bit. So I'm going to concern myself with the whites and the blacks. So I'm going to take this highlight side over here. You can see there's a big spike over here. That's all of these values here. Most of it is this, and then that other part of that curve is this part over here. Now, I don't want to completely minimize or lose this drop shadow either, so we're not going to blow it out completely. So I'm just going to start to bring this up and see, and just even to there, I think might be enough, right? When I do that, all of a sudden, I still have a drop shadow, but I've lost the edge back here without having to do any cloning. And if I can avoid doing the cloning on 36 layers, I think that's great, right? I don't want to have to do that. And basically we've clipped that, so now these parts are 100% white, right? Just to double check that. Let's just take a look here, window, info. So that brings up info panel, and just to double check, white again is 255 in all three of our channels, right? So when I come in here, it's almost 100% white. It's still at 244, so it's not 100% white yet. It's actually, just a little bit above that. Now I could keep clipping this, and try to get it closer to 255, although but I actually probably don't want to actually, I don't want to lose that drop shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and back this back off a little bit and make sure that I'm losing that edge. The edge is what I really care about. But I want to keep a little bit of that drop shadow. Okay. So we'll go ahead and go there. Again, now with blacks, I could make that a blacker, but I think we've got pretty good exposure. I want to maintain some detail in there. I've also got my midtones, so I could, open up the midtones and then decide to bring the blacks back down or something like that. But I don't want a lot of contrast. I want all those little details and things in there. So I'm just going to turn off a couple of these and just look when I go to the next picture and the next picture down, that it's keeping that same brightness and that same color, and the overall exposure looks pretty good. All right, now there are a couple of things that are happening, right? So I want this to be as clean as possible, and so I'm going to turn these back on. The easy way to turn on multiple is just to kind of click and drag, so I can just drag on up. Now back to my first one. So there are a few little things. Now normally we want to do things that are non-destructive, right? I don't want to accidentally do something to the picture that's going to destroy it or make it unchangeable. But the thing is with this, because we have so many layers, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work on the actual layer itself, and just do a little bit of light cloning just to clean up any little specks and things like that. So when I click on that individual layer, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead and use the cloning tool or the stamp tool. And my brush is really big. So again, brush sizes are the bracket keys, which are just above return, those kind of right and left brackets. So I'm just going to bring it down so it's a little bit smaller. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom into, hit Command plus, just so I can see a little bit better. And I'm going to clean stuff up. So I'm going to use the Option key. I'm just going to click, boom, and I'm going to go over here, click, and just clean up a little bit of these spots that are a little bit dirty, and there's not many of them. That looks pretty good. And I do have a little tiny bit to this edge back here, so I'm just going to take some of that white there and just kind of paint it across, and then a little bit over here, just to soften that edge up a little bit, and maybe back here too. Okay. There we go. So I'm not going to do a lot, right? Just a little bit, and I can go ahead and get rid of this info panel. So just some quick little cleanup stuff, just so that it's a little bit, as clean as possible. All right, now once we have that, then I'm going to go ahead and just turn that layer off and then do the same thing on the next layer. So again, it's just going to be a couple little things. I'm just going to focus on those few little spots that are the most distracting. Now, because we've used adjustment layers, as we go and do the cloning, it's really important that up at the top that you choose current layer and not all layers, because on that first one you probably noticed there was a little bit of white that was on that was starting to show up, and it's because as it was cloning, it was sampling from that brighter one and applying it to this darker one, so it was causing some issues. So make sure that you're on there, and then just go in and just do each of those individual layers, just those couple little things just to clean it up. But we have to do it to each of those layers so that it's consistent, so that we don't have some of our dots and distractions. Okay, so last but not least, doing this last little one, just those couple little spots. I have been softening the edge back here just a little bit, just to soften that. There's a little bit of a transition there. I was having one little issue, so because we have that adjustment layer at the top, maybe don't have it on all layers, switch that to current layer. That way it's only pulling the color from the color that's on. So it's not grabbing something lighter and put it in on top of that, which I think is what was happening previously. So now I've got all of those. So there's all my layers back to the beginning, and they've all been retouched all the way through. So let's go ahead and we'll just, let's get those all turned back on. So again, I'm just gonna click on this first eyeball and just drag straight up. So that they're all now active. Now that we've got all of them retouched, we should probably check and see if there's any other little things that we might wanna do before we move into our final, starting to move it into the GIF part. So it's looking a little bit purple. So one thing we might want to do, let's try this one. I'm going to try adjustment layer, and let's just do color balance. And so we've got our 3 sliders. We're looking, and really it's more in the shadows than anything, because the other parts are all pretty light. But let's start with the midtones. So purple, blue are, yellow is kind of the opposite. So let's just see if we add a little bit of yellow to that. Just warms it up a tiny bit. Not that we want it a lot. It might actually just be those shadows that are bothering me. So let's go shadows, and let's make the shadows just a little bit more neutral. Let's see if it's making any difference. I mean, yeah, I feel like that looks a little bit better. Just has a little more warmth to it instead of all that kind of purpley blue. All right, so now that we've got all of those together, let's go ahead and we're going to go into the step to start to make it into the animated GIF part. So we've got all of our layers. Then what we need to do is we're going to go up to the very top in Photoshop, and we need to go to the one that says window. And then there's one that says timeline. So it's almost to the very bottom. So this one here, it says timeline. So we're going to click on timeline. Now the default usually is create a video timeline. So we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this arrow, and we're going to say create a frame animation instead. So we'll go ahead and click the create frame animation. And then once we do that, then we're going to click on this button part that says create frame animation. So first we have to do the drop down, then we have to actually click on this part that says create frame animation. Now when we do that, it only creates a single layer. Now, we don't want to have to do this 35 times, right? So it's kind of subtle, but so now that we're in timeline, all the way over here at the right-hand side of the timeline, there's a little button here. It's got 3 lines, which is the icon for menu. So we're going to click there. Then we're going to choose Make Frames from Layers. So we're going to click there. That then puts in all of our layers. There we go. Now, it may be going in reverse order, not that it really matters, but let's just take a look. So now that we've got them in place, we can just hit play, and that will then play them. All right, now a couple of things happened, it looks like. Our adjustment layers didn't apply to all of them. So let's see if we go like that, if that fixes it for all of them. Yeah, okay, good. That's much better. Now, if we wanted it to go the other direction and not, because I think it's going in the opposite direction of the way that I shot it, we can just click here, and there's another option that says reverse frames. So now that we've got the frames reversed, now if we play it, it should spin in the opposite direction. There we go. All right, so when I went ahead and turned on our adjustment layers so that they showed up on our frames here, it created 2 extra frames. And so when we play it, notice there'll be like a little blank spot. So what we want is we don't want the blank spot, right? But we did need those turned on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this layer 1, and I'm just going to hit the trash can, and that'll go ahead and delete that frame. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this now first layer, delete, and then delete. So that gets rid of those extra frames that we didn't need. And so now when we play, it should keep our adjustments on and just go ahead and play our animation. Okay, great. Now, it's looping already automatically, probably because of things that I've done in the past. So if yours isn't looping, it's probably because of this button down here. So mine says forever. If you click here, there's another one that says once or 3 times, right? So we've got different ways that it can play the animation. If I just have it on once, it goes 1 time through, and finishes, right? So That's up to you, but I'm gonna go ahead and loop forever. Now that we've got this all put together, we only have the final step, which is to actually export it and get rid of, get it out. So we're gonna go up here to the very top where it says File, and we're gonna go to Save As, first of all, because we wanna make sure we have our document. So we're gonna go Save As, and I'm gonna save it to my computer. And this is going to be a Photoshop file, so that if I needed to re-edit or make changes, and this is DIY Turntable. And I'll just go ahead and save it. The location is going to the same folder, that's fine, save. So now I've got that part, set up. So I could come back and redo this. Now that shouldn't take too long because our file isn't super huge. But then what we want to do is actually export it. We need to get it out. We need to get it out as an animated GIF, not a Photoshop file. We can't do anything with a Photoshop file as far as the internet's concerned. So we're going to go up to the top again, File, and then we're going to go Export. And then there's lots of different ways it can export. So we're going to choose the one that says Save for Web Legacy. So it's about the fourth one down here. So we're going to click there. Now, when we do that, we're then going to look at our options. And what it's doing is it's picking what colors to use. So over here, the thing about GIFs is it saves space because it only picks out of 256 colors. So it tries to figure out which colors are the best ones to match what we're doing. And ours is just pretty much black and white, so it doesn't need a lot of color. Now, if it didn't look great, there's also some things you can do inside of here to change the patterning. I think mine looks pretty good. This doesn't look like pixelated and things, so I'm not going to change it, because sometimes that takes a little while. But if yours is looking kind of pixelated, you might want to try switching that. So then once we have that selected, and it's going to be creating a GIF, it's got our file size. We don't need to shrink this down. Now, if we were going to upload it to, say, like Weebly has a minimum size that needs to be less than 10 megabytes for a file, right? And it's going to treat this as just like a picture. So if we were going to upload it to Weebly, we need it to be smaller than 10 megabytes. So if I look down here, it says it's 11.8. So if I wanted to post it to Weebly, that's too big. So I could actually just do a percentage scale, or I could rescale it here, right? So I could go, well, okay, maybe instead of 1,000 pixels, I'm going to go with 900. Let's just say, for instance, 90%. And so once I click out of there, it should start to recalculate. And again, we're looking at this part here where it says that it's 11 megabytes. So now it's less than 10. So we need it less than 10. So let's go with that. 900 is fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then it wants to know where. I'm just going to do it right to the desktop. And then I've got my DIY turntable folder, and I'm going to say save. All right, so then once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and minimize my Photoshop and get rid of this. And I'm just going to open up a Chrome window. And so just to check and see, like, is it working? If I take that file, which is now inside of my desktop in DIY turntable, and here's the GIF. So if I just drag, just the GIF into here, it should load. And this is what it would look like on the web. Plenty big. So it's spinning. There's my DIY turntable in action. And we've retouched and cleaned up all those lines and shadows. So what I want you guys to do is basically take your time, really do a good job on cleaning things up. Mine was pretty, it was pretty clean to start with, but if you tiled paper together and there's things in your background, spend some time. You've got the time in class, go through there, clean those things up, and then, do it to each of the frames. And I know that's a lot, but that's okay. It'll be good practice, right? And then export it as the animated GIF to put up onto your website and get it turned in.